Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the January 8th, 2019 Planning Board meeting. My name is Kathy Barnard. I'm the chairman of the Planning Board. Let me introduce the other members, starting down at my extreme right. Brad Harriman, who is the representative from the Board of Selectmen on Planning Board. Next to Brad, Peter Goodwin. Then Mike Hodder. To my left, Vaughn Dugan, who is the vice chairman. Susan Replier, Planning Board member. Matt Sullivan is the director of Planning and Development. And Kathy LaPierre is our recording secretary this evening. We have a number of public hearings to go that we're going to do first, and how we're going to do this. Let me read them all so I know some of you folks are here for a particular one, so you'll know the order that we're going to do them in. And then we're going to do them one at a time. Matt Sullivan will make a presentation, and then at the conclusion of that, we'll then open that item up for public comment. So you don't have to remember everything, or I think last year we did them all together, and that got kind of confusing. So.
And just a note, copies of all the warrant language are over on the side of the stage over there, in addition to a few of the maps in color that are in the warrant language that's included over there.
Okay, let me just quickly read the list, and this is the order that we'll be going in, that Matt will make the presentations. The first one is the expansion of non-conforming structures. The next one is about a definition change for corner lot. The third one, parking standards and waivers. The next one, the affordable nonprofit housing. Zoning ordinance is a change in that ordinance. The following one is the Pine Hill Development District boundary amendment. Following that, landscaping. And the last one would be the Bay Street Limited Business District proposal. So the first one, do you want me to read what it says on here? Sure. Into the record? Okay. Okay, so the first one will be for the expansion of non-conforming structures, to amend the expansion of non-conforming structures section of the ordinance to distinguish between variances, special exceptions, and building permits, require survey and a variance for construction with further encroachment into a setback, allow total cumulative expansion up to 25% of the existing lawfully non-conforming habitable footprint, square footage by a special exception. This is excluding some features. Allow for vertical expansion above an existing non-conforming habitable footprint area beyond 25% via a special exception, with other proposed construction activity beyond 25% or with further encroachment into the setback requiring a variance. Okay, Matt, go for it.
Perfect, thank you. So the structure I'll use to walk through each of these warrant articles tonight will be consistent. I'll start by reviewing what the existing language in the ordinance is, either in specific terms or in more broad terms. Again, these specific changes that will be completed, should these be ultimately approved and recommended by the Planning Board to the warrant, are listed in that document over there. I'll then talk a little bit about why the change is being recommended by the Planning Board, and then walk through the proposed language that we are suggesting for the ordinance. The first of these changes, and perhaps the most complex change being considered, is a modification to Section 175.43, the expansion of non-conforming structures section of the zoning ordinance. The existing language of the ordinance is relatively brief, and part in the strike through here, I just want to show that we're proposing to remove this language It basically reads that a non-conforming building or structure may be maintained or rebuilt as it existed at the time of the passage of this section and may, by special exception, be expanded by no more than 25% of its existing area at that time. This is relatively brief language. Here in Wolfeboro, we have many non-conforming structures, particularly along our waterfront, those that predated zoning. So we deal with modifications to these non-conforming structures on a very regular basis, particularly through our shoreline permitting process. However, in doing so, we're recognizing that because of the broadness and the vagueness of the ordinance, we're having difficulty applying that ordinance, and particularly in enforcing that ordinance in what are in many cases anomalous situations or very specific situations that don't totally meet what our ordinance is designed to handle. So again, the character of the ordinance in being vague makes it very unclear what requires a variance, what requires a special exception, and what simply requires a building permit when it comes to modifying an existing non-conforming structure. Further, I would suggest that there is a history of inconsistent application of this language, and I would attribute this as well to the vagueness. Because we're dealing with so many unique situations on the waterfront and this ordinance has been in place for so much time, I think there's been different interpretation and specifically application of it to a lot of these properties, and that's a challenge for us. With that, there comes really a need, I think, for consistency, not just for planning board staff and planning staff and how we apply the ordinance, but also for the folks who are applying to us for building permits and to do modifications to these structures. They need to have a certain level of predictability and expect a certain level of consistency when we're giving determinations on how they might go about modifying the non-conforming structure they might be applying for. So that consistency and reliability and predictability is huge for us, and we're sort of seeking that here with this modification. The solution, as a result, is to add more specifics to the ordinance, and I would suggest that although we are adding more specifics and lengthening the ordinance in language, that we're actually adding really a lot of clarity to what we already have on the books in 175-43. Specifically, we want to make it clear to folks who we're talking to what is that special exception, what is that variance, and what simply requires a building permit in these situations. So we're doing a couple things with our suggested modification. This is a good example where I'm not going to show the full language here. I'm sort of going to walk through a bullet point version. And again, if you have questions about the specific language, it is available over there. The amendment that we're proposing is to distinguish, and we're going to do a couple things. The first of which is we're going to require a survey and a variance for any construction, again, involving a non-conforming structure in the setback that produces further encroachment into the setback area. So if you have a building that's, you're subject to a 20-foot setback from the property line, your current building is 10 feet from the property line, you cannot expand such that you're less than 10 feet from that property line, creating further encroachment. That's one situation we're trying to deal with. We're allowing a total cumulative expansion, meaning that if you do multiple expansions over time, they can only be up to 25% of the existing lawfully conforming habitable footprint area, and you can do that via special exception without a variance. So whatever portion of your structure is non-conforming, you can actually do up to a total of 25% expansion of that over time of the footprint of that by getting a special exception through the Zoning Board of Adjustment. And I should mention the special exception standards are such that it's intended to be a permitted use if specific conditions are met through the Zoning Board, whereas a variance requires some meeting of hardship and is much more challenging to achieve. And I should also note that that non-conforming habitable footprint does not include what we call pertinent features. That means decks, stairs. If those are further into the setback area, that does not give you additional rights to expand. Those are considered sort of accessory. We're also going to take a step that I think does broaden the ordinance, and that is to allow for vertical expansion above an existing footprint that's non-conforming, so basically adding a second story. But we're going to require that you must seek a special exception through the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Again, intending to allow your butters to be notified of the construction work that you're trying to do, have an opportunity to comment on it, and really assess whether or not there'll be a negative impact to the property, to the neighborhood, and to your butters. And again, that would be a special exception for vertical expansion. We'll also sort of clarify the fact that other proposed construction activity that does not meet these special conditions or goes beyond the 25% expansion that I've just discussed when it comes to the habitable footprint area, that would require a variance. So doing a 50% expansion would require variance, and anything above and beyond that, of course, would require variance. So those are the sort of the specifics that we're adding to this 17543 non-conforming structures. Additionally, we're just providing 3 very specific situations for non-conforming structures that would be by right, meaning that you'd really only need a building permit for these. Those 3 with some specifics listed here: installation of a new foundation or replacement of an existing foundation under an existing non-conforming structure, provided that these specifics are met, no increase in sill height by more than 24 inches, the existing footprint is not expanded, obviously, and that the resulting structure falls within whatever district's height limitation that exists. That's condition number 1. The second is replacement of a structure, provided that the structure is the same size and configuration as the structure that's there now. Or in some cases, we see things that are more conforming or in a less non-conforming location, so that will be permitted to replace a structure of that nature. And lastly, one situation we see very regularly is removal or replacement of existing open decks, a traditional deck design. And we're going to allow that by right, provided that the replacement deck is the same size or smaller than the deck that's there now, and that the building inspector has a chance to sort of certify the existing location of the deck before any replacement work is done. So those 3 activities will be permitted by right under this modification of 17543. I think that's a good summary of the modifications that we're suggesting here. Again, I think the intent is to provide clarity and predictability to applicants. We are, in some cases, being a bit more stringent in the ordinance, in other cases, relaxing the ordinance. But generally, I think we, in discussions with the planning board, this is the best way to move forward, particularly with the waterfront sensitivity that we have here in Wolfeboro. Okay,
thanks, Matt. And the planning board has spent several sessions discussing the wording. We understand what Matt's issues are, and so we've tried to make it as clear as possible, but in rereading it, I hope that's the case.
Yes. Yep.
So anyway, I'll open the public hearing on this particular item, and then once we've had public hearings on this item, I'm then going to ask the planning board member to make a motion to continue the item until January 22nd, which would be our second public hearing on the zoning amendments. So if anyone wants to comment on the expansion of non-conforming structures, now's the time to do that.
Oh, Suzanne, I would just make sure that's on.
Just a general question to Matt. Will the full new language appear on the ballot?
Yes, the full language will appear on the ballot, not the abbreviated language listed on the public notice. Correct.
Okay. Anyone else?
I would also just quickly note we did have council review of this proposed language, and council had very limited comment, and we will make those modifications. Nothing that made any kind of material change to the proposed language at all.
Okay, and this was to section 175-43 of the zoning ordinance. Member, please make a motion.
I move that we continue the amendment number 1 for 175-43 to the second public hearing, January 22.
Thank you. Motion has been
Time specific?
at 7 o'clock.
At 7 o'clock. I beg your pardon.
Okay. Motion has been made. About a second?
Seconded.
And second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. On to the second one. The second one is a definition, 175-175. This is a definition change for corner lot. Go ahead, Matt.
Yes.
Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. To amend the definition of corner lot to establish both lot lines along a street as front lot lines and others as side lot lines for the purpose of setbacks.
Okay, so this is an item that was on the planning board's work program for 2018. This is an item that we really don't encounter too often, but does arise when we have lots that we call corner lots, where two or more public streets surround or form sort of the corner of an existing lot. The existing language in the ordinance is very convoluted. I'll quickly read it to you. For a corner lot, it says that the front property line of a corner lot shall be the shorter of the two lines adjacent to the streets as platted, subdivided, or laid out, or that line which is obviously the front by reason of the prevailing custom of the other buildings on the block. Where the lines are equal, the front line shall be the line which is obviously the front by reason of the prevailing custom of the other buildings on the block. If such front is not evident, then either may be considered the front of the lot, but not both. And where such property line is not obviously evident, the zoning administrator shall determine the front property line. So you'll see that we're actually recommending to remove the first essentially 7 lines of that, and I'll show you what the proposed language is in just a second. The reason we're doing this is, A, the existing ordinance is complicated in nature. It's difficult to understand, and particularly with the prevailing building or character of the buildings on the street, that gets a little challenging and introduces some subjectivity that I prefer to remove. Where this has become an issue is when we're determining how to measure setbacks on these corner lots, whether or not the two lot lines along the street are front setbacks, whether they're a side setback and a front setback, and what the other lot lines are, whether those are a side and a rear, 2 rears. We needed to provide some clarity to that so that when we're measuring setbacks, we're being consistent in our practices. And particularly, we wanted to do this really to ensure that our streetscapes and the character that's intended to be preserved via the front setbacks is really respected in these different zones. So the proposed language that we're suggesting is listed here, and we're changing the section under a corner lot. And we're saying for the purposes of building setbacks, all lot lines abutting 8th Street shall be treated as front setbacks with all other lines as side setbacks. Where such property line is not obviously evident, the zoning administrator shall determine the front property line. So what we're doing here is saying that both lines along the street are, or 3 lines, 4 lines, are all to be measured as front setbacks, with all other lines to be measured as side setbacks for the purposes of interpreting the setback section of the applicable zoning.
And that's to give a little more flexibility to people when they have the more severe front setback.
Exactly right.
Okay. Okay, I'll open a public hearing on this item, if anyone wants to speak to it. No? I'm looking at Suzanne because I usually can rely on her. Okay, I'll close the public hearing for this one and entertain a motion to continue the corner lot definition to January 22nd.
At 7 p.m.
At 7 p.m., thank you.
Seconded.
Oh, okay, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye, opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, the next one. This is parking standards, 175-138. This actually was suggested by our attorney, but Matt will go over that. And it's parking standards, waivers from parking requirements. 2, we're going to strike amend, remove the existing parking waivers provision, and to instead provide for a parking alternative reduction in lieu of compliance with the ordinance's parking requirements if certain conditions are met. And then crossing out a section to redefine the section parking alternatives, which the planning board cannot grant a waiver, but alternative solutions for meeting the parking standards may be proposed. Okay, Matt?
The Wolfeboro zoning ordinance is somewhat unique in that it includes all of the planning board's parking requirements, even for applications going for site plan review. And as a result, that limits the flexibility of the planning board. And the reason for that is that under statute, it's not appropriate for the planning board to grant waivers from the zoning ordinance unless what's in the zoning ordinance is what's known as an innovative land use control, and our parking standards are not one of those. As a result, what I'm recommending here is to remove the existing references that exist in our ordinance to the planning board's ability to grant a waiver, because under statute, our attorney's feeling and my feeling is the planning board does not have that authority. However, I think we want to recognize that there should be a preservation of the flexibility that waiver provision granted. And as a result, we've suggested a simple modification this year, and I should mention that we're looking forward to potentially amending the parking standards in 2019, but this year, simply replacing the references to parking waivers with parking alternatives, giving the planning board the flexibility to sort of reach consensus with an applicant if they are unable to meet the strict standards of the parking ordinance without requiring a variance through the Zoning Board of Adjustment. I should also note that there are some specific thresholds under which an applicant cannot drop in the zoning ordinance, so the planning board does not have the authority to fully waive any kind of parking for a given development. I think I've sort of covered what's on this slide here. Again, waivers cannot be granted by the planning board, ensuring flexibility for parking, particularly in site plan review applications, and also in some subdivisions potentially moving forward. And again, the change there is just to remove waiver language and replace with alternative as the term that will be in the ordinance.
Okay, and documentation would need to be provided by the applicant as it is now for the waiver.
That's correct. If the applicant is unable to meet the standards contained herein, they would have to provide some sort of justification, and likely that would have to be reviewed by town council as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll open the public hearing on the parking standards waiver provision. Anybody who would like to speak to that issue?
I'd just like to ask a question. Are there any foreseen circumstances whereby the planning board would be put in a position they wouldn't want to grant some flexibility and they would be sent to the zoning board?
Yes, technically an administrative appeal could be filed against the planning board if ultimately the planning board determines that if an alternative is proposed to the planning board and the planning board ultimately rejects that alternative, an applicant could potentially file an administrative appeal to the Zoning Board of Adjustment to get relief from the planning board's decision. But I guess I don't know how prevalent that would be. But I think the planning board's interest, at the risk of speaking for the board, is to work with applicants, particularly in the downtown area and other sort of commercial zones in town, to try and provide for adequate parking, but also allow for some flexibility based on constrained lot size.
And shared parking and things of that nature.
Sorry, can you give an example of some things you run up against that with parking that you would wish that you could have waived, or that you see that now that you can waive, you would waive? Yeah,
and the brief answer I'll give is that we actually have not had to apply this particular standard in many cases where we have a parking challenge, and the reason for that is that we already allow flexibility in the central business district, which is where we see most of our issues, Suzanne. But as we look out to the other zones, particularly Wolfeboro Falls Limited Business District and the Bay Street Limited Business District, where we're seeing more commercial development, we want to have the same flexibility in that area as well. And that's currently not built into the ordinance with this waiver provision.
Okay. So if I'll close the public hearing, if a planning board member would make a motion to continue this item to January 22nd at 7.
Happy to move that we continue amendment number 3, parking standards 175-138 to second public hearing January 22, 2019 at 7 p.m.
Thank you. Seconded. Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. On to the next item. This one, again, we've been advised that this is more of an issue that was brought to our attention that we really should not have this particular item in our zoning ordinance, but the section is 175-27(3). It's the overlay district, affordable nonprofit housing for the elderly and affordable nonprofit workforce housing phasing, and to remove the restriction on 40 affordable dwelling units permitted per year, to bring the ordinance in compliance with RSA 674:21 of 4 and B regarding project phasing as amended in 2015.
That's a very good summary of the change. The existing language in the ordinance under 27.3, 175-27.3, density and phasing for affordable housing overlay district, We're recommending the removal of item B here. That's affordable nonprofit workforce housing projects shall be phased so that town-wide no more than 40 dwelling units shall be permitted in any one calendar year. In conversations both with council and with some housing folks, actually, they identified this issue in our ordinance, and specifically that we were not in compliance with the 2015 amendment to RSA 674-21 4B. And the specific change that happened there is that you'll see this language underlined and bolded at the bottom. There was an amendment made that says that phased development does not include a general limit on the issuance of building permits or the granting of subdivision or site plan approval in the municipality. And as you've just seen, our ordinance had a very specific restriction in it that is no longer legal under the under the section of state statute. So we're proposing to remove that restriction.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll open the public hearing on this item. Anyone has any comment? Right?
Shall not exceed 4 units per acre. Would that still be some form of regulation of control of how many?
No, that's okay because it's not a hard cap on permitting. You're still allowed to have a density restriction, but just not a hard cap on the number of units to be permitted.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I'll close this public hearing and entertain a motion to continue the item.
Move that we continue item amendment number 4, revision of 175-27.3 to January 22, 2019 at 7 p.m. for a second public hearing.
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Okay, on to the next one.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to say that I'm going to recuse myself from amendment number 5, because I have property that's in that.
Okay, well, maybe now is the time for me to acknowledge that I'm a member of the Eastern Lakes Region Housing Coalition. We're co-owners of the Harriman Hill Workforce Housing Development, and we received a abutter notice. I feel as if I can review this in a neutral manner, but if any member of the public or board member wants me to step down, I'll be with that. Any member of the public have any? Yes, for the Pine Hill Road development.
Yes.
Yeah, Kathy's just asking if any member of the public is uncomfortable with her sitting on this.
Me sitting
she
on
received
it.
an abutter notice for it. Just to discuss.
Madam Chairman, I speaking for myself on the planning board, have full confidence in your ability to be impartial on this issue.
Okay, thank you. Then if no one is concerned, I'll continue on here. 175-2C 12, this is the Pine Hill Road Development District Boundary Amendment to amend the boundary of the Pine Hill Road Development District to include the following lots: 176-010, 176-011, 176-012, 176-020, 189-011, 190-015, 190-020, 190-030. Matt, go ahead.
This is an amendment that I hope everybody in the audience who may have received an abutter notice for this, that you have a copy of the colored map that's in the front of the room. The map that I'm showing up here is challenging to read, so it's better if you have a larger copy. The existing Pine Hill Road Development District, which is, I would offer, our most permissive commercial zone in some ways, is shown in sort of the brownish outline there along Pine Hill Road, which runs down the right-hand side of it, or the eastern side of it. The proposal is to amend the boundary of that district to include the 8 parcels highlighted in blue. Each of these 8 parcels currently is occupied by some form of a commercial use and is there either via grandfathering or via a special exception or variance. And the idea here is to bring those parcels more into conformance with the zoning, with a commercial zoning district. So that's the idea of doing this modification and to grant them additional flexibility. I should note that because this proposed zoning change affects less than 100 properties, all of the properties within 100 feet of this proposed change, so all 8 of those parcels there, received an abutter notice so that they were aware of the hearing this evening. If you aren't aware of the uses allowed in the Pine Hill Road Development District, I can certainly read through those, and if we get that question during the public hearing, that may be helpful. But again, I think I've reviewed the intent here. We're sort of moving from looking at the map, we're looking at the Polini pit in the bottom, sort of the bottom of the map there. Those are the 2 parcels there, the Polini pits. Pine Hill Road Storage is the 3rd parcel up there. And then we have the Town of Wolfeboro Public Works Garage, Night Security, Accidents Happen, Magazzini, and I believe I've covered all of the uses that exist in that area. Those are the 8 parcels that we're talking about potentially rezoning as part of this. One other note I should make is that some folks in the audience may have received a notice for a public listening session just about a month ago. That was a review of an earlier iteration of this proposal, which include further parcels up Pine Hill Road development, Pine Hill Road, I'm sorry. Ultimately, the planning board decided to pare this proposal down to just include the 8 parcels that are shown here.
Okay, and we did receive an email, that's why I was just looking.
Yes, I left a copy.
Looking for that each planning board member has, thank you, let's see. It was from Judith Gooding Morrison at 95 Pine Hill Road, and she expressed some concerns about the rezoning. Okay, so I'll open the public hearing, and anyone that wants to speak to this issue, please come on up.
Jerome Holden, Grove Street, Wolfeboro. I'm very happy to see this happening. I wish to point out that places like Magazzini, Grinding, and Night Security are, according to your ordinance, only allowed 1 square foot of signage, and now they'll be allowed 24 square feet on the building and on a freestanding sign. So that's a really great improvement of this ordinance, and I wish to do this in the C-True Route 28 corridor so that this would all come into compliance there too. That's correct, Matt, right?
Yeah, any rezoning of the Route 28 district would likely not be Pine Hill Road Development District, so the standards would be different if we were to do a modification there.
Yeah. I just would like that to happen if you guys could move toward that. But I just want to clarify that that is what's happening here. These 1 square foot signs can now become 24, and they get 2 signs each.
Confirm that.
Right now, I'm dealing with a customer that has a lot here in one zone, and another one can have 24 square feet, and the other can have 18.
Yep, the Pine Hill Road Development District allows for a 24-foot freestanding or ground sign. Additionally, projecting signs 16 square feet. So it's certainly more permissive than the zoning that's there now, which is general residential zoning, or residential zoning for some other sections.
Right. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Michael Flaherty, representing Taylor Community, the 23 families that live up on Taylor Home Drive. And obviously that's a residential setting for those families. And I know it's currently being used for commercial use, but I'm more not concerned with the current owner, who's been a good neighbor. I'm more concerned with any future owner and what they may potentially do under full commercial zoning and how that would impact the families that live in that neighborhood.
Okay, and that's one of the Polini.
Yes, so the Taylor home abuts the bottom blue parcel directly, so their property is just to the south there.
Yeah, no, I have one. I was just pointing it out to people. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Kirk Beswick, also with Taylor Community. I want to get a little bit further into that. The 2 Polini properties are one of the properties, I think it's lot 11, abuts our property, and currently we can hear those commercial activities. I don't know what our current appraisal is, but we have a substantial investment in that property, and one of our ongoing concerns is the extension and the growth of the commercial district around our residentially zoned property. This past year or two, we've had difficulty with the people on Filter Bed. Some of the activities back there were disruptive to our residents also, and I made a number of calls to code enforcement and other folks here in Wolfeboro trying to get that corrected. And what's going to happen, in my estimation, if we continue to surround our property with industrial type activities, and I went through all of the allowed activities on the Pine Hill Road extension as well as the special exceptions, many of those would be detrimental to the quality of life of our residents in that community. Our folks are looking for a quiet residential location close to downtown. When we built that property, that was exactly what we achieved. However, over the course of the years, zoning being what it is, many of these these other usages that weren't specifically allowed in the residential zoning have been allowed to continue there, and every year it seems to be a little bit more intrusive into the quality of life for our residents. My concern with this one is specifically the two Polini properties where they're very close, and they have been good neighbors like Michael Flaherty just mentioned, but should they sell that property with it being rezoned commercially, the next purchaser then could do anything that's listed under the allowed or special exceptions by that zoning, and we would have no control over that. Where we're considering a substantial investment potentially in the future, that's a determining factor for us, what could be allowed around us, because should some further development happen or a warrant article that's been proposed be allowed to pass, those things would be very detrimental to our community and may cause us to consider making some different decisions in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I'm Bruce Turkelson. My wife Harriet and I live in the Taylor community on Taylor Drive. And even now, at very early hours in the morning, Polini's operations, as far away as they are, without considering the one closer to our property, is very, very noisy. There are explosive sounds from time to time, very early in the morning and all day long. They are crushing rocks or doing something there that creates disturbing noise almost all day, every day. I can tell you that it is disturbing how early in the morning they start. And I like the Polinis. They've done work for me on Sewell Road when we lived there. But this is such a noisy operation. It's really very disturbing, and I just can't imagine a lot closer to us becoming part of a noise-making, rock-crushing, noisy operation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Edie Damaris, and I live in Wolfeboro, and I do have some relationship with the Harriman Hill development. But one thing that just concerns me when I look at how we're doing it, like strip going up the road, picking existing businesses, but this is a neighborhood with a lot of modest income homes on this road, and would we be doing this, it just occurred to me, would we be doing this on Sewell Road or Pleasant Street or some of the other streets? I'm surprised we haven't heard from some of the other neighborhoods. And I know with the one coming, through a petition, I was noticing that, because I've canvassed in the area, a lot of low-income families, they're at very modest homes, that are going to be affected by this. And I think we should stop and think about that, because Wolfeboro has a critical need for modest housing, and we're kind of destroying some of the neighborhoods that have modest housing in them. I think we need to look at that and make sure that we put permitted uses, that we think of who's across the street or who's behind or who's beyond. I think we should consider that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I have to read from my paper here. I'm not as good at speaking freely like the previous speakers, but I can see what you're trying to do. There is a need to kind of make things more cohesive, but I'm not in agreement with how you're going about it. So, in 2006, the Planning Board amended the zoning to allow for elderly housing overlay. In 2010-11, the Planning Board amended to repeal commercial C1 Pine Hill, and also in the period, the board laid out a plan to focus on the downtown core and a plan to make a radius out of the business core and then a mixed use, and then that core would grow and then turn into a residential area. At or about this time, the Harriman Hill affordable housing was proposed and approved and built behind the proposed location. In March 2011, Article 6 amended delete Pine Hill ordinance and amend it to rezone to residential and expand on one side of the road. The area in the brown was renamed to Pine Hill Road Development District with the purpose to, and this is the stated purpose on the warrant, protect the form and function of Pine Hill Road corridor and to allow for office facilities as a matter of right, contractors' facilities, and sales and services associated with said facilities by special exception. There was a planned effort by the board not to increase the Pine Hill residential, commercial, industrial area, but to repeal on the, I guess that's the west side you're proposing? My east and west might be wrong. The side you're proposing.
Eastern side.
Which one?
Eastern.
Eastern? I'm going to fix that.
Well, eastern and western, actually,
Oh, okay.
to a point.
East/west side of the street completely. Understanding those current businesses would be grandfathered uses in perpetuity. This plan has worked just fine, and there has been, as planned, no impact on the residential area, even with a couple of conditioned variances. There have been a couple of variances given there recently, and I think they've gone smoothly. The master plan was followed as well. It encouraged moderate housing within that area. Rezoning this section of Pine Hill Road to the uses under the definition is a mistake, but will accommodate a few. Conflicting language used to the definitions. Let's look at the allowed uses as read and stated by Mr. Sullivan. The commercial uses included office, printing plants, community services, multifamily, assembly operation for what? Storage and use of heavy industrial mechanical equipment, lumber yards or sales of building supplies, laundries and cleaning establishment, and storage facilities for warehouse facilities. Now look at your definition section, because that really hasn't been talked about with the board, the definition as how it matches up and fits in with the stated ordinance. Your definition section, most are not defined and is subjective, but some that are, commercial for profit or compensation. What type of commercial retail? Printing plant, like commercial printing plant. What are we talking about here? A newspaper printing plant? It's not defined. Assembly operations, assembly light. That assembly light is like contractor's yard light and excavation light, and it just gives towns such trouble. The assembly of already manufactured parts into complete or incomplete units could be a noisy industry. Storage of heavy industrial mechanical equipment, not defined, could be heavy mechanical industrial equipment. Storage facilities, including warehouses and wholesale distribution center. Could that be a Walmart distribution center? Lumber yards or sale of building supplies, I couldn't find a complete definition of building supplies. So could that be a Home Depot? I know I'm making an exaggeration out of this to make a point. The described above uses do not correspond nicely with the definition. There needs to be more work on this, not just selecting what lots you think would be good to change. Some of these uses clearly need to be prohibited, and some are clearly inappropriate for this part of town. I totally understand when the zoning of that brown section was made, why the board did it. It was to protect the existing businesses, but they are protected in perpetuity. And the area proposed is not with the present, it would not be protected with the present language. There are several, if not more, reasons why the board should not put this forward at this time. One, the area has a lot of residential homes in it and is surrounded by residential use on two sides, so that use must be compatible with residential, not counting being compatible with the town master plan. The town master plan exists as it is today. The planner has also already agreed that Pine Hill District would not include retail stores, probably due to pressure from downtown merchants. So a commercial designation is inappropriate and inaccurate and likely would be impossible to enforce, keeping retail out if challenged by a retailer wanting to locate there. Some of the uses the planner describes for this district, as the ordinance currently allows, are either industrial, which is both inappropriate, and incorrect zoning designation for a commercial district, but are so harmful to an area with predominantly residential homes that could see its property values reduced by the zoning definition. The master plan encourages moderate housing within the area proposed, and the executive summary from UNH survey in 2016 stated that the opinions of the town actions to manage and develop are largely similar to the 2006 survey, and that more than 90% of Wolfeboro residents think it's important to preserve open space, and relatively few think it is important for the town to provide more land for commercial or light industrial uses. Any zoning change should wait until the new, yet-to-be-adopted master plan and the not-yet-started FLU, future land use, section is complete. I would think the biggest opposition might come from downtown merchants already suffering from the Amazon effect on their businesses. There is no groundswell for businessmen requesting to repurpose Wickers, or how about the business park that sits empty? Efforts should be put into developing that before enlarging what exists. More affordable housing, multi-housing, housing conversions are needed, and a place where small businesses like woodworking shops, etc., can be permitted, but not all the rest within a still residential area. Any change should be gradual and only permit the uses we actually want and need, not this list. Let's take the time to rewrite a small business, multifamily housing, or limited business affordable housing designation with clear listing uses and definitions, instead of trying to put a fix on what isn't working. Empty land zone may be the incorrect designation, fitting a round peg in a square hole. Let's take the time to investigate and analyze, not just doctor what isn't working. Do a rewrite after the future land use section and after the master plan adoption. Why rush? Who was rushing you? You only had 4 or 5 meetings, and no in-depth discussion as to consequences. Please hit the pause button. Thank you. Sorry it was so long.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Jerome Holden, Grove Street, Wolfeboro. I want to make sure that, because I'm on the master plan committee this year, one of the failings of the master plan committee is there's no place to expand business in this town. If you have people come in that want to put in any businesses, this is the only place that is available. The rest is all full or too restricted to anyone to open up a business. We really need to, I know that a lot of the people here come and retire and they want it to be sweet little Wolfeboro, but if they don't want their taxes to be going up all the time, you need to have business here that makes money that pays taxes too. And this is the area to do it. So I applaud that this is expanding. I do understand the noise problem for Taylor. Perhaps a wall could be required or something to stop some of the noise from going over that way from Pelini, but I don't know any of the other solutions to that. But we do need expansion in Wolfeboro. We need room. Can't do Route 28. It's all restricted because of the Watershed Association and everything else. So only place. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Oh, okay, then.
One more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, can you come on up here, please? Okay.
It's okay.
Okay, if you would start over again.
We're Stephen and Grace Magazzini, ran a business for 30 years, Pine Hill Road, 75. Nice to see you all.
Yes, nice to see you.
Couple concerns. I heard a 24-foot sign. I believe it's only like 2 feet, please. I mean, I don't need that as a neighbor. Setbacks from parking would be wonderful. It's hard to see down the road if they're parking right near the road. Like, parking lots shouldn't be so close to the road. We've been there, I'm shaking, I'm nervous. We've been there for a long time. We were there before Harriman Hill. Obviously, we know you. Never complained, never said anything, but also we're never informed of it going in. Have to tell you that. I guess that's it. I don't know how our property will stand at this point. It was always commercial. Trust me, when you go to get a loan, we're well aware of the fact that you don't get those breaks because it's always been commercial, as far as the banks are concerned in lending. I don't think you're changing us any, are you?
If I may, are you still operating a commercial use there?
In the front half, yes. It's
Okay.
not us per se, it's a larger company, but yes, they are paying us for that little spot in the front.
Okay. So we wouldn't be changing the nature of what you're doing on the property. We would just be changing the nature of what you're allowed to do on the property.
Okay, it's just a transition now.
Well, and a budding property as well. So you're sort of on the north side of what we're looking at. So the property to the south of you will be changing in zoning as well. So they could potentially do something different too, within the permitted uses that are allowed. Not to say they would for sure, but it's possible that they would.
But when you label something as commercial, anything can go in there. Like, and I have nothing against the car repairman down the street, but you can smell those fumes. You know, when he's out in the summertime and he's out there spraying away, and I'm in my backyard, I can smell that. Right. So I think if you expect people to live in the same place that there's businesses, you have to accommodate the fact that that particular business needs to accommodate the people who are living there and have a little respect for that. As far as other things go, I was looking at the map, and if you walk down the road towards Harriman Hill, there's a ton of junk on the right-hand side that's been there since the cows came home, and it's never been removed. So where's the beautification in all this new business going in and the new construction? We have an abutter who's got more junk in his backyard than, so now if he puts in some kind of a commercial something over there, Or is it just us?
It's not just you, it's your property, the Hospital Aid barn to the south, additionally the night security property, and then across Beck Drive as well. There are a few properties that are impacted as part of this proposed zoning change. So it wouldn't be just you, you're sort of the top of it, but you would be impacted by an abutting property too, potentially.
Okay.
So it could impact you. So.
I think that's it.
Okay,
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Kirk Beswick from Taylor again. I had another thought while I was listening to the other comments. When I look at this development plan, the gray line that extends to the west there encompasses quite a bit of property. There's quite a bit of acreage in there. And it was recently that I think Goodhue built that boat storage facility up there. But the other concern that we've kind of been dancing around from Taylor's perspective is what's going to happen with Filterbed Road. As the town looks at long-range planning, that appears to be something that's going to be incorporated into this for an access road that may loop out to 109. Our concern with that is because that road, Filterbed, borders the back of our property. That increased traffic there is going to be very close to our property. So the traffic noise, cars, doors coming and going, that again will additionally change the nature of our property should the town decide to develop that further and make that an access corridor to jump out to 109A, bypassing, coming down Bay Street and actually cutting through there on that property. I'm assuming that when we decided, or the town decided to make that property part of that development, that was what they were thinking at the time, because that'll be about the only way to assess the back of that property is through Filterbed. So I don't want to discuss the warrant article that's been proposed, but as we have looked at that and looking at this, we're starting to see the big picture. And I just, again, want to convey to the board that our concern is how that will affect our property. And currently we have 24 residents there, but we have approved 16 more additional units there that we could potentially build on that property. And then with some of this other development happening, we'd want to reconsider some of that. So I just want to convey that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay,
It's Grace Magazzini again. What happened to the Economic Development Committee? They were supposed to put in a industrial park up behind where all those pits are, up and back there. It never happened with Mr. Hughes?
So I'm not sure about that one, but the Wolfeboro Business Park was this, it's sort of I'm trying to highlight it up here. These lots up here,
Right.
that business park was subdivided and some of the lots have been developed. So that business park effort was completed in a sense, but not all of it has been done. But I'm not aware of any other business park development that may have been proposed.
It was supposed to be up and behind, up by where the lumberyard was, up and back there.
Okay. Not aware of that.
It would have been 25 years ago.
Yes, I may be aware of what you're talking about. So there was, and you're aware, Kathy, of the discussion about potentially laying out Filterbed Road and doing a large development back here that was discussed about 25 years ago.
Yeah, economic
recreational fields and
Right,
other things were
exactly,
proposed.
all that.
That ultimately never moved forward.
Okay.
And I don't think there's been any further discussion on it since it was originally proposed at any time.
Because
so.
it just seems logical to me, if I had a small country town, that I would want all that type of industry in one location, so it didn't upset the apple cart of other people who were trying to live here.
Yes.
That's all.
Yep.
okay, thank you. Okay, okay.
I'm sorry, Chris Pongratz, I'm from Pine Hill Road Storage. I had, I think, just a couple questions and maybe just a comment without either supporting or otherwise on the proposal. My first is so I'm one of the properties, okay, with the proposed change. Should I have gotten a notice on that? Did I miss a notice on?
You may have missed the notice.
Okay.
One of the challenges with certified mail too is you have to be there to receive the certified mail, which is a challenge. So you should have gotten a notice, and I assume the folks in the audience did as well.
Okay.
But you should have.
Yeah. All right. So all right. So
I can confirm that to make sure, but.
Okay. All right. Yeah. No problem. And then so I guess my thought would be, is I'm looking at these 8 properties that it would entail. So changing it from the Bay Street to the Pine Hill does more than just change the use. I assume that would also change things like setbacks, coverage, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And so just looking at some of those lots as very small lots, to change them to lots that would have greater setbacks and smaller coverage, I think would render a serious limitation on them, and I'm not sure that's the intent.
Well, just to clarify, the setbacks aren't purely less or more restrictive. So the proposed zoning for the lots that we're showing here, you'd go down to a 10-foot side yard setback, whereas the existing general residential zone is more restrictive than that. So you're actually increasing the developability of some of these lots as well. With that said, there is a 30-foot front yard setback, and I believe the general residential district is less restrictive than that.
Also 30.
It is also 30. So we are really increasing, I think, the developability, if you will, of those lots.
Okay, all right. I didn't come prepared to talk about it, just like, because I was a little surprised by it. How about the lot coverage? I think coverage goes from 60 to 40, right?
Yeah. So currently in the GR zone, which is primarily the parcels on the right-hand side there, those are at 30% lot coverage. Pine Hill Road Development District permits 40%. And I believe up to 40% coverage. Yep.
Okay. So as it relates to our parcel, it would bring it from its current 60 to 40.
Which parcel are you referring to?
I'm sorry. So not the parcel that's on today's agenda.
You're talking about Bay Street Limited Business District. That is less restrictive when it comes to the lot coverage. So you would be in a more restrictive coverage scenario, yes.
Correct.
You're the unique parcel in the bunch that we're looking at here. Yes.
Right. Okay. All right. All right. So that would be the concern.
Potential negative. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and entertain a motion to continue this item until the 22nd of January.
7 p.m., so moved.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Mr. Harriman, are you going to come back and join us? Okay, the next one, 175-153 and 175-158. This is landscaping, streetscaping, and buffering standards. This proposal is to remove the existing landscaping, streetscaping, and buffering standards in the zoning ordinance. These standards will be relocated to the Wolfeboro Planning Board's site plan review regulations. And we're not really removing anything, we're just taking it from the zoning ordinance where you're required to follow the exact wording in the ordinance and proposing to put these standards in the site plan regulations where the planning board would have a little more flexibility in developing properties and be able to work more productively, I think, with property owners. Go ahead.
That's well said. I'm not sure I need to say much more. Currently, with these standards being the zoning ordinance, it's very difficult for the planning board to work with more constrained sites or sites in the downtown area, which are currently, or in many cases, not compliant with these standards. So by moving these to the site plan review regulations and out of the zoning ordinance, it would give the planning board the ability to grant waivers from these where appropriate and by request of the applicant. And I think that's a real positive because we do have many constrained sites that exist right now, and working with the applicants to date has been somewhat challenging. So the idea here is flexibility for the planning board, and I think the ability to reach consensus with applicants where appropriate. So we're proposing to remove everything that's in there in 175-53 through 158, and then to add in this simple statement into the zoning ordinance, basically referring to the site plan review regulations and subdivision regulations.
Okay, so I'll open the public hearing on this item. Suzanne.
Is this compatible with your discussion of design standards? Are you opting to go this route, or does that help the design standard that you were working on? Or?
It's not an either or. They're not totally related. The commonality, though, is that we're interested in moving this into site plan review so that the planning board has more flexibility and can grant waivers. That's sort of the common thread, but
Well, these end, if we move ahead with the architectural design standards,
Right,
it'd be in the site plan.
I'm just saying they would likely, if we proceed with the architectural design standards, they will both exist in the site plan review regulations. One dealing with landscaping and streetscaping and buffering, which is really kind of the greening of the lot, and the other dealing with the more built environment architectural design standard element.
But I would think they would be compatible, more compatible, maybe. Any other comments? Okay, I'll close the public hearing on this item and entertain a motion, Mr. Hodder. You're doing a great job.
I move that we, beg pardon, that we continue amendment number 6, landscaping, streetscaping, and buffering standards 175-158 to January 22, 2019 at 7 p.m. for second public hearing.
Seconded.
Okay, thank you. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the last item is in section 175-2.C.9. This is the Bay Street Limited Business District boundary amendment to amend the existing boundary of the Bay Street Limited Business District to include the following lots: 190-019 and 190-018 and 190-017. And this is more of a technical issue, which Matt is going to explain.
It's a fairly straightforward technical issue. We have a discrepancy between what was proposed for the Bay Street Limited District, what was ultimately shown on the zoning map for the Bay Street Limited Business District, and what the zoning description says. What was originally proposed for the Bay Street Limited District included these 3 parcels that I'm indicating here. But ultimately, when the zoning was adopted, the description was not amended to reflect the inclusion of these 3 parcels. These 3 parcels have been shown on the zoning map since most zoning maps that I've found. And what we're proposing to do is simply amend the district description specifically to include them. So these 3 parcels, 190, 19, 18, and 17, would be added there. And they're currently zoned, I would argue, based on the descriptions, as residential zoning right now. It's just a technical amendment to add these in.
Okay. Okay, I'll open the public hearing on this item. Somebody would like to comment on it? Now is the time to do it. Okay, then I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I move that we continue discussion of amendment number 7, Bay Street Limited Business District boundary amendment, 175-2.C.9 to January 22, 2019 at 7 p.m. for a second public hearing.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, so that completes the first public hearing on the zoning amendments. We will, as you all heard, continue all of these items on January 22nd. And also, in addition, there'll be 2 petition warrant articles, one relating to wayfinding signs and another relating to rezoning of an area by Filter Bed Road. So in the meantime, if anyone has written comments, please send them into the planning office, and planning board will get copies of any comments that people have, or if you have someone that wasn't able to come this evening and they want to comment, please encourage them to send us an email or a letter. So, but thank you all for coming, and I'll continue on to the next item here. The next item is a site plan application This is for Pine Hill Road Realty Trust, LLC, Christopher Pongratz and Judy B. Osgood Revocable Trust. This is a public hearing and site plan review for some storage buildings, which are actually going to be located on Land Bank Lane, I would say, since it doesn't have an address. But it's tax map 190-24, and this is case 2018-01. Okay, so in this case, the applicant is going to make a presentation and answer any questions that board members might have. If Matt Sullivan has some comments that he wants to add, we'll listen to those comments and then determine if the application is complete. If it is, we'll make a motion to accept the application as complete, excuse me, and open the public hearing on the item. So I'll turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, could we ask for addressing the letter of authorization issue?
Oh, yes, right.
Or status of ownership issue?
I'm sorry, I thought the owner's signature on the application was sufficient. Was there something additional that was required?
We typically seek an actual letter of authorization from the property owner. And I remember in our first initial discussions, you had noted that you would likely be the owner at the time of the public hearing.
Right, so I am not the owner currently. We are just scheduling closing. It should happen imminently. But I guess to the point, I was under the impression that all we needed was the owner's signature on the application. Wouldn't that accomplish the same thing as a letter of, why would the owner sign an application if it's only problematic because he's in Florida.
Yeah, it's really just a matter of protocol. I'm going to ultimately leave it to the board, of course, but typically we do require a formal letter of authorization on the application, but it's up to the board to determine whether that's a matter of completeness.
I think the previous...
And I have no objection to providing it. Okay, we don't have it tonight, but I'm sure the owner would have no problem providing it. And our closure is imminent any day.
In a previous application, I believe I looked in the zoning requirements, and it's pretty specific that we do need that.
Can we make a contingency?
At the risk of repeating what I said at that prior public hearing, I believe you can make it a condition, but the board was concerned about that. So I think it is appropriate to make it a condition when you have a signed application, but I understand the apprehension about precedent that it sets. So
I think it's kind of sloppy to make it a condition of approval that we get a letter of authorization from the owner to proceed. But that said, there are other documents that we are not in current control of. We do not have an indication of ADA parking compliance, at least according to the planner's memo here. We don't have a letter stating that the lighting is going to be dark sky compliant, save for a note in the lighting plan. And we do not have a letter refusing to abide by voluntary design guidelines, which we are supposed to be in possession of. My thought when I read this application was, in addition to the lack of the authorization letter, there were 3 other documents that I'd like to see to make this application complete.
So we did come prepared tonight to discuss those 3 issues. That did provide us those.
Yeah, I believed that those issues could likely be addressed tonight as part of the presentation and public hearing, but if you feel that they are items that render the application incomplete, then...
Well, they render the application incomplete in my mind at this point. If you have 3 of the 4, that's still 1 missing, but it's 3 better than currently now. It would have been nice to have known that we had those 3 to be presented a little later. Howsoever, the lack of a letter of authorization was fatal to at least one applicant in the recent past, and he had to come back at a subsequent date with his letter of authorization. I would hate to hold him to one standard and other applicants to another.
Right.
If I may comment, I certainly would recognize the consistency of an application. So the matter that you're referring to was, did the owner sign the application, though, or was that? I mean, I think that would be an important distinction, as it is intuitively to me.
It's not an important distinction in my mind.
I see.
The lack of the letter of authorization makes the application incomplete in my mind.
I understand.
Okay, and other board members, how do you?
I would suggest that the case that Mike is talking about was one that we sent back to make sure everything was correct. And if we don't follow that same procedure on a regular basis, then I don't know whether we can say that people have to follow that procedure.
If I could just draw one distinction at the risk of sounding as an advocate for the applicant, the application we were talking about before was a boundary line adjustment between two properties where there was a change of property being proposed. In this case, I understand that we don't have a full letter of authorization, but we have a signed application signed by the owner, and I don't believe that a site plan review done on behalf of an owner is completely equivalent to a boundary line adjustment between two properties. That's my personal opinion, and I recognize it's up to the board to do differently.
Not to be argumentative, but I don't think the matter of the application is relevant. The fact is the application procedure requires a letter of authorization regardless of the nature of the application.
Dawn, Susan, how do you come out on this? Do you want to go ahead and hear the, go ahead and hear the application and
Right.
ask questions and...
Yeah, I mean, if you're considering a continuing discussion of completeness, I think hearing the presentation is a good idea.
Okay.
So we can make it clear what other items may need to be addressed.
And the board may feel that the lack of a letter of authorization is not fatal to the application and decide to go ahead and approve the application, and I'll just vote no, but that's fine. I've been on the other side of the fence many other times.
Okay, well, but before we get started, the zoning district and the planner review, that needs to be changed to Pine Hill Road Development District.
Yes, I apologize. I made an error. I referred to it later as the Pine Hill Road Development District, but in the designation, I had an error there.
Right, okay. Okay, why don't you go ahead?
Okay.
Thank you for your patience.
No problem. Good evening. My name is Scott Frankos from Brown Engineering and Surveying, the engineers, surveyors for the project. We are proposing two self-storage facilities on a parcel that's on Land Bank Lane. Currently, it's existing vacant land. Probably 2/3 is cleared, another third has woods on it. There's no wetlands on the site. We did have Stony Brook consultants go out and check the site and got a letter from them saying there's no wetlands. So what we're proposing, as you look at the plan, the darker brown shaded colors on the plan are the two structures. The gray going through on the west side of it is the access, 24-foot wide access through the property. And as you may know, Pine Hill Storage is just to the south of this, and we're connecting into that with an 18-foot wide connector road per the regulations allow that for a two-way access. The drainage comes down Land Bank Lane, and we're collecting, there's a roadside swale that comes down and drops in front of this into a catch basin. We're mimicking the same drainage. All the drainage flows to the northwest corner of the property, and it's going to be maintained for the proposed drainage as well. Just we're slowing it down by collecting it and running it through a retention pond, and actually reducing the flow of the water off-site. Ultimately, all that water from Land Bank Lane that some collects off of Pine Hill Road ends up in the big swamp out back of Land Bank Lane and down into Filter Bed Road area. which is a large swamp by, I believe, that neighborhood that was being discussed earlier. The lighting, we had Sharon Lighting design the lighting. And we're prepared to meet the 20% cutoff on the horizon per the Wolfeboro lighting regulations. Matt mentions dark sky compliant, but there's nothing in the regulations that specifically say
Spells out what that is.
But following the 20% from horizon, we'll be meeting that requirement.
Further, the ordinance does not specifically say, actually, that all lighting must be contained on site. I don't know if you caught that as well, but it alludes to it under some of the definitions, but does not require it. So you'll see that I note here there is some spilling onto the adjacent lot at 0.1 level, I think, on the photometric plan, but I don't believe that that violates the standards in the site plan review regulations, as I read them.
The actual regulations allow 0.02, so we're underneath what the regulations require. Landscaping, we're proposing pretty simple landscaping. We have 5 trees on site and 8 shrubs. There was a question on whether or not a tree was within 30 feet of a parking space. I believe it was the first one on the left as you drive in, as one map brought up, and there is a tree proposed right at the end of that parking spot.
The one that I was referencing is actually the parking space on the southern side of that north building. I was concerned there wasn't a tree within 30 feet of that parking space, so sort of the second one down.
Second one down, within the trees across the path, right? Okay. I'll look at that.
Let me just take a look real quick. Yeah, I on that second space down, one moment here. I was just concerned based on the scale on the plan.
Okay.
It looked like that tree on the sort of the southwest of that may not be within 30 feet. I just wanted to certify that it is.
Yeah, and if it's not, we'll add one more tree in there to meet that requirement. One of the other notes that Matt brought up was snow storage. We didn't show that on the plan. We'll show snow storage as you drive into the site from north to south. There'll be snow storage on the right. There's a little section there we can show snow storage. And then as well as that end of all 4 parking spots, there's areas that we could put snow. And going from the connector road, going from the proposal to the existing structure, there's area within there for snow storage too. Where we're within the 40% and coverage of the zone. And I do have pictures. We don't have the building that's going on here, but I have pictures of the newest building on the adjacent site for the color scheme and pictures of building 3 on the adjacent site, which is going to be the same style as...
Same style as what you're proposing, okay. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
The top picture is building 3 on the existing facility, which is the shape, and the roof is going to be slanted to the back like that on these sites, so it would slope from the west to the east on the plan, or left to right on the plan. And the color scheme is going to be the lower one, the tan and the green, and not the brown and the tan. One of the other requirements of the site is to meet 150 feet from Pine Hill Road. We meet that, and in excess, it comes about 30 or 40 feet into the property, but the buildings are situated so that we meet that requirement as well. And there was a question about one of the buildings meeting a 30-foot setback. That
It looked like, it didn't look like it was overhang, it looked like it was drip edge, but I wanted to just confirm that it wasn't in that, encroaching that front setback
right,
area.
it does not encroach. I will confirm that.
You'll confirm that with Matt?
Yes.
Okay, because it does look on the plan like it's an encroachment of the setback.
what we're showing on the plan is a drip edge around the building, which may be interpreted, let me just,
Initially, I interpreted it to be the building, but after reviewing the plan in more detail, it looked to be a drip edge or sort of a gravel
Right.
drip edge area.
what we're proposing, because the water will shed off the building, is a 2-foot drip edge around the entire building for the rainwater from the roof to drop.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying, yeah.
And when you're saying drip edge, you don't mean overhang.
No, I mean
no,
drip
right.
edge.
Just to clarify for
Rain garden around, yeah.
That's more of an infiltration trench than a drip edge.
Well, it is technically called, we have a drip edge, but yeah,
Yeah, but you're not under draining under the drip edge either. It's just a pure infiltration trench with a sub base or something.
right, I believe we proposed 2 feet by 2 foot of gravel.
It's not a structural encroachment either, so.
No, not an issue.
And one of the last things I'll address is the ADA compliant. As far as I understand it, if you only provide one, it has to be a van accessible one. So what we're going to propose is parking space number 2, which is on the south side of the first building. We'll turn that into a van accessible ADA parking spot. The sidewalk that goes around it will turn into the hatched area where you pull in and the right door opens for the
Okay, good.
accessible.
It'll probably bring that in within 30 feet of that tree too, so you may not have to adjust the location of that tree
Okay.
based on widening the space.
But the space.
You're going to widen to the north rather
The
than.
space will stay the same size, actually, because it's 9 and 5 right now,
Okay.
where it will be 8 and 5 for ADA. Right.
Okay.
I believe that wraps it up.
Can you speak to the traffic circulation? Are you going to have people enter your other facility and go out Land Bank Lane, or
They
vice
could,
versa, or?
We looked at both ways of disconnecting and connecting it. It seemed to make sense, both for the town, for emergencies and different things and circulation. Typically, if they have a unit in that old section, we'll say, they're going to go in through that main entrance probably, and then if they have one here, they'll come down Land Bank.
Would you, would you anticipate a different address for this property, or would you maintain the Pine Hill Road address? Because I think that would be critical in directing patrons.
So not to give a complicated answer to a simple question, but we would, from a business perspective, we would maintain our single address on Pine Hill Road. Okay. But that's not to say that we're merging the properties into a single address from a technical standpoint. But we wouldn't use a different address for the promotion or the ordinary day-to-day running of the business. We would maintain just the one address.
The reason I ask that is because if a different request is, or a different address is requested off of Land Bank Lane, I think that's a big traffic increase potentially on Land Bank Lane, whereas if it's maintained on Pine Hill Road, I don't see an increase in the traffic
Okay, well,
or an
we did,
impact.
at TRC, we had a lot of discussion about Land Bank Lane.
We did have a lot of discussion about Land Bank Lane, yes.
Can we have some more discussion about Land Bank Lane?
Certainly can.
Certainly.
I am concerned about Land Bank Lane Road Maintenance Agreement, which was discussed at TRC. You're going to be having people going down that private lane to get into the site. Public access over a private road, we have nothing on paper here to indicate that road is going to be maintained. I haven't heard any discussion about that yet here. Maybe TRC has, but I haven't.
So-
And I'd be very happy to see a road maintenance agreement entered into by you guys and the abutters onto Land Bank Lane, guaranteeing that the road will be maintained in a safe status for the public to have access to your property. Haven't seen anything here yet.
Mike, the challenge with that is, while we recognize a road maintenance agreement should be in place here, you have to make a rational connection between this specific application and the need for that maintenance agreement, and I'm just not certain that we can do that as part of this application. And we went through a similar discussion on the subdivision on Maplewood Drive, the Melanson subdivision, where a road maintenance agreement was a concern there. Ultimately, council advised that unless we could make a rational connection between the specific application and the maintenance agreement, that it was not in our best interest to require it.
May I also add just a bit to that? So we also would love to see the road. We'd like to have some sort of maintenance agreement with the folks that share that road with us. But to make it a requirement towards our development would preclude us from having any real ability to negotiate with the other parties involved if you folks put that burden onus only on ourselves. But we, of course, like the others that use the road, I think would like to have something in place. And indeed, the road is maintained as it currently is, even without these buildings there. So I think that its maintenance would be better, even, notwithstanding any change at all. But that being said, it would be great to have something in writing and something that we all share and what have you. And I will endeavor to do that. But to make it part of this complicates the matter and could make it more difficult for me to achieve.
Yeah, I understand your point, and I appreciate your point. I am somewhat concerned about the absence of some form of agreement, or at least some assurance that this road is going to be maintained over time. It is not maintained as town standards currently. I'll defer to the planner's opinion here.
And particularly, Mike, because this site has a secondary egress, I think it will be even more challenging here to require it when the applicant could simply say, we are going to gain access over the abutting property. We could, in that case, require an easement, though, over lot 19020 to the southern side, where we likely wouldn't need to require it as part of the application as proposed, because it has a secondary egress.
The saving is that you have deeded access across Land Bank Road, Land Bank Lane, and that kind of implies the necessity, at least a practical necessity, if not a legal necessity, to keep the road maintained, because you have deeded access across it. So I'll defer to you in this case, but I am a little bit uneasy about allowing public access across a private road with no maintenance agreement in place.
And I have another issue with access. I'm just looking like the 18-foot connection through to the other lot goes through the corner of a building.
Yeah, I was going to bring that issue up as well. That was sort of the basis of my comments here. The 18-foot accessway appears to sort of drive right into the corner of that existing storage building. From an alignment perspective,
It doesn't, though. If you take the edge of
If I may, before that's a very good point, we want to get to it, but I just would like to cover the access one more time before we move off that subject. I have no objection to, and I'm fine with having a easement or right of way from the old facility to the new facility, just to kind of have that issue covered from both directions. In other words, we'll put that easement on the old property to access the new property. The applicant has no problem with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and what we've done in past situations is we've had that easement provided to the town as a condition of approval with review by council, the town's council. But obviously, because you're deeding an easement to yourself, it becomes a little more challenging. But having that document available would be a condition of approval here.
Okay.
You want to make it a condition of approval?
Yeah, well,
If we get to that point.
yeah, let's.
If we get to that point, I would recommend it. We have requested in other situations for drainage easements and other easements. Preparation of an easement from one lot to the other with review by town council.
Even though he's giving an easement to himself?
Yes, preparation of the document with review to be added to the file, so it's at least prepared.
Did you want to make some additional comments, because we haven't gotten to you quite yet?
Yes, I would, but I think Scott was going to address the alignment issue as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and
All
just
right.
as a point of an easement, you can't give an easement to yourself.
Right, so what we asked for the preparation of the document, and that's it. So it's on file, but not recorded, obviously, so, yeah.
Aren't these two separate lots of record?
But the ownership is the same. That's the challenge. So you can write the easement docs in favor of another lot, but ultimately to record it, it has to identify another property owner, and we can't do that as part of this, which is funky, I know.
Because you have full right to both properties, so there's no easement.
Yeah, we are dealing with this on another property in town where the planning board required it, and we thought it could be recorded, and ultimately it could not be recorded, so we're just asking for preparation. So you're ultimately relying on the easement to be executed should the property change hands, but it's at least a condition that you put in place.
Okay, do you want to bring some, or are you all set for now, or?
I think so, yeah.
Well, I'm not clear on this alignment issue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
can we
I'll
talk about
address
the
it.
alignment? Yeah.
So the 18-foot alignment, it actually doesn't go into the building, it's lined up with the corner of that building, and that's the reason we kept it as far over to the, looking at the plan to the right as we could to get that 18 feet and get it between that corner of the building and the corner of the property. It's if you put a straight edge on the edge of that pavement and line it up with the building, it will go directly right. The edge of it is lined up perfectly with the edge of the corner of the building.
Are there bollards on that corner there on both sides?
There isn't.
That's an older building. There are no bollards on that building.
Could we request potentially, if we move forward with this application, that bollards be installed by the abutting property owner?
Yeah, we can certainly do that. There's no problem with that whatsoever.
At least on the northern side. Obviously, if you put it on the eastern side, you're actually going to restrict access more. So
I think what would make more sense, if I may, is to install two bollards, one on either side, okay, but not one that would further, shall we say, encroach into that limited amount of space that we have. So we could put a bollard on the north side and on the south side to prevent vehicular traffic from heating it no matter which way you're coming, but yet not into the corner. Am I making any sense?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It's just as easy to put in two as one.
So I get that it's 18 feet as it goes across the property line, but it doesn't seem to measure 18 feet from the corner of the building to the edge of the pavement on the next property. So I just carried a line through here and a line through here, and this is,
Straight edge, line this, you line the edge of pavement up, there's a 2-foot shoulder, that's the line right up.
so from here to here is 18 feet.
Yes.
Probably not to scale, right? So not, yeah, so that's useless.
That's mine. Sorry.
Sorry, it's useless, Matt.
Well, we can measure straight edge at least, not scale. Yep. Do you want me to review my additional comments?
Yes.
Just to reinforce a few points that were made, regardless of the status of Land Bank Lane, the town's practice historically has been to issue driveway permits on private roads, simply in the interest of drainage, particularly that ultimately terminates on public roads, so a town driveway permit will be required for this. As I noted here, I don't feel that based on the volume of units that a traffic study is necessary. I don't think it's a significant increase, particularly because of the nature of self-storage. It's not such that it has high volume of trips in my experience, so I don't feel study is necessary. The ADA accessible space has been addressed. Particularly, I was concerned about this because the applicant's narrative letter included that the units are ADA accessible, and we just want to make sure there's an ADA space actually present on site to facilitate that access. So addition of a space in place of number 2 there would be excellent. The landscaping issue we have addressed. On the drainage matter, a full stormwater drainage report was prepared and subsequently reviewed with Dave Ford on January 4th, 2019. And Dave reviewed that favorably and was supportive of the drainage analysis, particularly based on the reduction in off-site flow that was indicated therein. And I don't feel that based on that reduction, a drainage easement is necessary regardless of where the overflow does ultimately terminate from the driveway crossing, which is on that abutting property.
One question.
Yes.
In your comments, report summarizes, it is concluded that if properly constructed, and my question was, how is this going to be controlled? Would that be the building inspector We'll make sure that this is properly constructed.
There are actually three elements. Partially, the building inspector is involved with some of the construction-related drainage elements. The Public Works Department reviews the driveway permit, which includes some of the other drainage. And I am proposing, similar to the last project that was done, one inspection by the town's consulting engineer as well to determine that all drainage infrastructure has been done properly.
Thank you, Matt.
Lighting, full compliance there, and particularly because we had a little bit of an issue with the prior site development and the some lighting that was installed there. Just wanted to make sure that the lighting was compliant, and it is as proposed. And lastly, I have recommended a site security, and if the board chooses to proceed with this, I'll promise Mr. Pongratz that if completed properly, I will be more timely with my return of his security if we ultimately choose to approve this. And just one question of clarification, are any signage modifications proposed by this project? Not that they are under the purview specifically of the planning board, but I was just curious.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. And again, sorry for a long answer for a simple question. Ironically, Jerome, my signed contract, happens to be here tonight, I think, on another matter, right? Nothing to do with this one. But he mentioned, just as we were in the audience, that the proposed change in zoning, if that happens, may allow us a slightly larger sign than what was currently there. But Jerome and I have been in discussions to replace the existing sign with the same size sign. So we don't want to make it more complicated. On the other site, not adding any additional signage for this site.
Okay, clear.
The only signage that I think that might be something that would be a directory in nature, like a small sign that pointed to the office or something, nothing visible from the street.
And obviously the renderings or the building photos provided do not strictly meet the voluntary design guidelines. They're sheet metal construction storage buildings, but I think this is exactly why if we move forward, we have the potential waiver provision in place, because I think we don't want a storage building that looks like a Adirondack Lodge. I think these look more than appropriate for their use.
Is this going to satisfy your requirement for a written rationale for his decision not to abide by voluntary?
Yes, I believe it's appropriate.
I'll accept that. Thank you, Matt.
Anything else, Matt?
What about snow storage?
Snow storage, it appears an amendment has been made to the plan to address that issue.
Yeah.
And Scott, could you just point out the snow storage areas that you were talking about, just so the board is clear on that?
This whole green area along the western side.
And there's no curbing there, so it's easy to push off. Sloped. Okay.
So there's plenty on the sides. And we'll show that as a snow storage area on the.
And just a quick question, probably in the details, but the concrete sidewalk around the spaces, that's at grade, not curbed?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So that plowing would be possible there?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so you're all set?
I'm all set.
Go ahead.
I think that there have been a few issues which really haven't been set in stone.
Right.
As in the ADA parking needs to be dealt with, the updated landscaping, and the certification of setbacks. It seemed like there was one setback which was in question, but was supposed to be fine.
Yeah, the setback issue I feel comfortable with. The landscaping issue compliance is really a matter of moving the tree if necessary, right. So I'm not overly concerned with that. I think that could be a condition if the board chooses to accept this as complete. The ADA space, I haven't seen a visual representation of, but I believe the space is there to create that.
Right. But I think that needs to be included in the plan before it's actually approved.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions or comments at this point? Because we need to determine if we want to accept this application as complete.
I'd be happy to move to accept this application as complete. Having heard all the testimony and the assurances from my planner, I have no longer any concerns on the 4 points that did bother me in the beginning.
Okay, I wish that we had the application or something so that we could see Mrs. Osgood's. Was it in here?
Signature?
Signature?
Have been in your packets. If you did not receive it, I will hand it around right now.
And if we accept this application as complete without the letter of authorization, the previous issue that we had with an applicant was, as you pointed out, a boundary line.
Yeah, I mean,
Adjustment.
I understand Mike's point that there may not be a fundamental difference there, but I think I do see them slightly differently.
Okay.
In this,
Do you have the application?
Do you have the application? I'm going to hand it around right now. Please note this is an original, so I don't.
Yeah, okay.
in the present case, we have the putative owner of the property sitting in front of us, where we didn't in the past, and we have his verbal assurances that this is copacetic as far as he is concerned, and we're simply awaiting that change. So it's quite different from the last time where we had an agent here who wasn't really even an agent, attesting to the fact that he was authorized
Yes.
2 times without a letter showing such. So
Okay. Okay, thanks, Matt.
my concerns are taken care of.
Oh, okay, then, if that issue has been addressed, it appears to me that all the issues have been addressed and this application is complete. Somebody would be willing to make a motion to that.
I thought I already had, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
So moved.
I probably wasn't paying
Seconded.
attention, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, so the motion has been made and seconded, and all in favor of accepting this application as complete, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstentions? Okay, so I'm going to open the public hearing. Jerome, are you going to comment on this? Okay, since you're the member of the public. Okay, Matt, do you have some conditions that
Yes.
you'd like us to consider?
I'm going to have some modifications to the conditions in your review. But condition number 1, incorporating the plan set, which will be amended subsequent, and I'll include a condition with the amendments in just a second, but the 10 plans that are shown within the plan set here dated December 14th, which will ultimately be amended. Condition 2, payment of all recording fees. Condition 3, I'm going to modify condition number 3 slightly, if possible. I'd like to have all final plans to be stamped by a licensed land surveyor and PE where appropriate, and a letter confirming the wetlands to be supplied to the town. Because Mr. Frankwitz did indicate that that letter had been provided, I just want to make sure that we have a copy of it in lieu of a stamp on the plans.
Okay.
So you will want a wetland stamp?
If you could just provide a copy of that letter, I'll just include it in the file. Condition number 4, incorporation of all the documentation submitted in the application package. You're all familiar with this language, and I'll include it as written here. 5, subject to the receipt of all federal, state, and local permits, including a Wolfeboro driveway permit approval. Condition 6, an as-built plan to be signed and stamped by an LLS to be provided to the town following project completion. Financial security based on the total cost of site improvements plus 10% shall be provided, and security shall be reviewed by the town or its designee. And I'd like to amend this to remove the standard quantity and cost form and instead suggest that the cost of review to be borne by the applicant. So again, that condition 7 will read a financial security based on the total cost of site improvements plus 10% to be provided. The financial security shall be reviewed by the town or its designee at the cost of the applicant. Condition 8, construction, the applicant shall enter a construction observation agreement with the town's consultant engineer for site work. Costs shall be borne by the applicant. Condition 9, installation of erosion control measures and inspection by the town prior to construction activities. Condition 10, engineer shall submit a letter certifying compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Condition 11, an ADA accessible, van ADA accessible space to be added to the amended plan set in place of parking space number 2 as identified from the north of the site. A letter of authorization to be provided to the town within 30 days of the date of this approval. Is the applicant amenable to that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. The letter of authorization within 30 days. An easement to 190, lot 190-24, over lot 190-20 to be indicated on the plans. Actually, I'd like to amend that slightly.
Yeah.
An easement to lot 190-24 to be drawn up and reviewed by the town's attorney at the cost of the applicant, but obviously not recorded for our discussion. The tree adjacent to parking space number 2 to be modified to meet the 30 linear foot standard of the ordinance and amended on the plan set. And I believe that I have covered all conditions of approval. I apologize for the on-the-fly amendments there. I just want to make sure we include all the changes that we've talked about.
Okay.
Last one, go.
Who determines what the total cost of site improvements is?
I'm sorry.
I'm just thinking of number.
So the applicant provides a cost estimate, and our engineer reviews it to ensure it's current to DOT pricing and that the quantities are correct based on the site improvements. And typically, we have some back and forth. I think as part of the prior application, the changes were made, and we accepted the security.
Okay, anyone want to add any additional conditions? All right.
I have one additional condition.
Okay.
Sorry. Snow storage to be added to the plan, obviously.
Yes, right.
The amended plans. That's it.
Okay. Okay, I entertain a motion to approve the site plan for the storage buildings on the land bank lane with the conditions just indicated.
Tax map number 190-024 with the 14 conditions as presented by the planner.
Okay, that motion has been made.
Seconded.
And seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next. Thanks. Good night. The next item is public comment.
Come on, Jerome. You're our public tonight.
Okay, thanks for
You
coming.
wanted to stay around for the excitement, huh?
Next item is action items. I don't believe we have any action items.
You do not.
And let's see, communications, letter from DOT advising us that they're going to be paving.
Yes. There'll be a portion of Wolfeboro that is
Right.
paved. As you can see, it's from the Alton Wolfeboro town. It does not include the portion of 28 from the Alton town line out to really sort of the Center Street area. The reason for that is that subsequent repavings and reconstructions will occur after this is done, particularly in the downtown area, and obviously as part of the Route 28 corridor improvement study that we've done in prior years. But Dave Ford, just so you know, is in active conversation with DOT about these improvements. He was actually not aware of this overlay as proposed, so he's working with them to ensure that we have an appropriate plan in place for any work that's going to be done.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He wasn't aware that this was going to happen.
Ah,
Or there was a different understanding. So this letter was actually shared to the planning board, but not received by Dave Ford, so I did give him a copy of this.
okay. Eventually it gets to where it's supposed to go,
Yeah.
right? Okay, no items on work session. New business, we were going to appoint the future land use committee, which all those members are so eager to get going.
Yeah.
But there wasn't.
The paper did not post our notice, so they're giving us a free notice posting, but we really wanted to commit to doing that, so I would request that we extend the deadline slightly so we can get that notice posted. I did post it on the website. Hopefully folks saw that. And we have gotten some requests.
Oh, we did?
Well, the requests that I've sent to you, Kathy.
Oh, okay. And those were, I mean, there were some people that had signed up in our forum. Okay, we finished our economic development and housing chapter yesterday. How are the rest of you doing?
We're done, except for I haven't seen the final version revised.
Sent that out.
Resend.
Yes, I can resend.
Okay, so people are pretty much, you're done, you folks are done.
We're getting started up
Yes.
again.
And yes, right,
We've been a little preoccupied the last
El
week,
caboose.
so.
right. So we're going to get there, by gosh. And the wayfinding sign committee will be submitting a position paper to you for the January 22nd meeting,
Okay.
and tell you all about everything we've been doing.
Buckle up, it's going to be thrilling.
That's right. CIP is meeting Friday. We're sort of having a wrap-up session for everything that we did for the CIP and make any suggested changes on procedures, which would then come back to this group.
Correct.
Okay, so that's pretty much, I think. Do you have anything else?
I think that covers it quite well. Just one note, I'm going to provide you with some information prior to the meeting on the 22nd on what the process should be to potentially amend some of these planning board sponsored warrants.
Yes.
Because obviously we received some comment tonight, and without getting into the comment, if the board ultimately decides that you'd either like to remove one of those proposed amendments or amend it, I'll give you the process for doing that. Okay? So I'll give you a little procedural document.
Well, we can't add to anything being proposed, any amendment.
No, you
But we
can't.
can delete.
Yeah, you can't perform any material changes, but
We can't delete then. It's a material change.
I think we can withdraw or.
I believe you can fully withdraw. Yeah,
The whole amendment, yes.
yeah, you can. Yeah, so I mean, let's take an example. The Pine Hill Road Development District. I believe you could ultimately decide to remove some of the parcels proposed in that, or simply remove the article as proposed. It would be impossible to add parcels because they would not be properly noticed under state statute. So that would be a challenge.
But if you remove parcels, you're basically redesigning your amendment, and you have to start all over, don't you?
No. The way that we've noticed them, as long as we are being more broad, we are adequately noticing, you could potentially amend it and remove parcels. So I don't see any issue with that. And that's why I want to get you some background information so that you are comfortable potentially performing amendments. Because the planning board ultimately decides what goes on the zoning warrant, and you have full capability to make changes as part of that public hearing.
That's why we have the public hearing.
Yeah.
That's why you have it.
You would not, though, for example, rewrite the non-conforming structures section completely as part of that public hearing process. It's really aimed at smaller changes.
Public hearing is required by law, at least one.
At least one, correct. We always do two. I believe last year, we actually voted on some of the more simple amendments at the first meeting. We did not this year, so all will be pushed to the next meeting. I may propose to Kathy and the board that we put some of the petitions and the Pine Hill Road Development District amendment up front so that folks don't have to stay through the entire hearing.
That would be good.
So just be prepared.
Well, the reason I asked was if we're required by law to have a public hearing, then we're required by law to include the public, be sure that they understand the language of the amendment that we're proposing. If we then, subsequent to the public hearing, make a change,
As long as the notice language is...
they're no longer dealing with what we had originally presented with them. They're dealing with something entirely different, and it's no longer the same amendment.
But the planning board ultimately reserves the right to present, well, Mike, I understand what you're saying. To me, the bigger conflict is if the public notice does not adequately cover the scope of the amendment and then you change that scope, that would become a problem. the planning board does reserve the right to change the articles. The public hearing is really just a procedure to ensure that the public's input is respected in the process.
I'll defer to you on that. You've been doing it longer than I have, but it seems kind of squirrely to me.
I want to check on it, particularly this year because of the Pine Hill Road amendment. I want to make sure that we have a clear process for amending that if the board chooses to do it.
So it seems a little squirrely to me if you listen to the public and don't have the ability to change anything.
Yeah.
Right.
And then it's sort of it's a political exercise, which
Yes.
But that's why we usually have 2 hearings, and I can remember when we were doing some downtown amendments, somebody wanted us to change the wording, so we did that at the first hearing, but then acknowledged it at the second.
and we aim to do that, but I know that the statute allows for some change because many communities only do 1 public hearing and they make changes. So I'm gonna get some more information on that. I do want to know. I haven't dealt with it a lot. What if we have a substantive change to one of these articles? How do we deal with that?
Yeah, and that would be a substantive change if we remove parcels.
Yeah, so I'll make sure I have some procedural information to you so that we're all kind of comfortable.
One question, procedural question for me. After we heard the comments regarding Pine Hill Road Development District extension, and they were a lot of concern, we said nothing. I decided to follow the board and not say anything because I figured that's what more seasoned members would have done. But my inclination was to jump up and say something, not necessarily in defense of what we had done, but to reassure people's concerns.
Like any public hearing, you could have done that.
And I understand I could have. Would it have been appropriate?
I'll tell you, I was actually surprised that the board did not choose to make an amendment tonight based on some of the feedback, to be quite honest with you. And I would have preferred that you had had a discussion tonight about a potential change rather than at the second public hearing for the very reason that we're talking about right now. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question.
No,
well,
you are, and I wish I had said something in that case.
It's okay. I just didn't want to suggest a huge debate if everyone was sort of comfortable with what we had proposed, which is what I assumed.
I assume that.
Right, on all of them.
I just assumed the board took the public comment and didn't have any thoughts, but if we had had a discussion after, I think you could have suggested an amendment tonight.
Speaking for myself, my feelings about the amendment have not changed as a result of hearing the public hearing. I think what we heard tonight was a lot of concern about issues which really we're simply stating that what's existing on the ground now is now kind of legal by making it an official commercial district. And given the uses that are allowed in the Pine Hill Road district, the uses that are currently being exercised are no different from those that are allowed by right, and those that are allowed by special exception have to go through a special exception process, which has a lot of controls built into it. So I had no concerns about making amendments. I'm perfectly happy to see it through again on the second public hearing, as written.
Any amendments that are discussed and suggested at the second public hearing, I would request that the board actually vote on those amendments for the record.
Yep.
Well,
Even
yes,
however minor they are. No, I'm just making sure that everybody knows.
I was not inclined to make amendments, but I was wondering about giving information, because certainly use of the noise and aggravation occurring, it's probably the worst case scenario of use right now. And at least we're allowing other scenarios that could be better.
I tend to agree.
And I don't know if it's an educational meeting.
I would say that, I'm assuming what comment you're speaking to, those folks have been made aware of that fact that you're saying right now.
Yeah.
That an excavation or a gravel pit is really one of the most intense uses that you can possibly have. Particularly when those pits there are pre-even site plan review, and as far as what expansion they could do, that's a little unclear. So, yeah, I agree with you. Those folks are aware, but they're just afraid. They're afraid of what the possibility is, and
The point is it really can only get better.
Yeah.
That's the worst case scenario, the one we have currently.
yeah.
If somebody, it makes it so that it could change use.
Yeah, and if they want to change the use to something else, which is equally or slightly less intensive, they've got to go through a special exception process, whereas the current occupants of the lot
And keep
never
expanding.
did.
What?
There's built-in protection there.
Okay, well, I'm concerned about the process. Because, I mean, basically, we took public comments tonight, held it over, and so we're going to need to have discussions and make decisions, as well as go through all the items again next time, plus 2 additional. And I just want to make sure everybody's clear about that, and I mean,
Yeah, and
we really need to know whether we can amend or not. Gosh, I thought we had amended
I believe you
warrant
can.
articles before.
Yeah, I believe you have full right to do that.
What amendments are people talking?
I-
I mean, are we actually inclined to amend any?
I don't know, because we haven't really discussed.
A basic question is if you remove or even add a parcel to a zoning change, a zoning boundary change, I need to make sure that you can really do that when you've noticed.
Can't add. I know you
Can't
cannot
add.
add.
You've got the
Because you haven't
notification
noticed
process.
it.
Sorry, yes, on the 100 districts or fewer, yes, I understand that, but removing is really what I think is more of a reality here, and I believe you can remove, but we need to confirm that that's the case.
What would we,
You can remove. I believe you can remove at the second public hearing.
what would we remove? I mean, if we remove it, we leave it in the current limbo state where these people are running commercial operations by variance or special exception, maybe, or by time
Trust me,
immemorial.
I agree, Mike. I mean, I still agree with the substance of the amendment. I just want to have the answer if the question is raised.
No, but you must be able to remove or do something, otherwise why would
Well,
we
is
have
it-
public hearings? I mean, we're supposed to be able to listen to people and react to what they're saying
But doesn't the
in a responsible manner.
Right.
But doesn't the public hearing allow the board to hear the comments from the audience and therefore vote for or against the amendment? So when it goes before the town, it's either 6-0 or, so therefore that would be a way that the board would be weighing in
Yeah.
based on the public hearing.
I agree with you there. That I
That's
think,
an all or nothing approach.
I think that's what we should be doing and not whittling it down because Mr. X doesn't like having somebody next door to him, so we take that parcel away from the amendment.
I don't think we're
Satisfy
inclined
Mr.
to.
X at the public hearing.
And a better example is the council comments that we received on the non-conforming structures ordinance. Those are changes that council feels should be made. Those changes do not need to be renoticed. They're minor word changes, but that is the addition that will be posted for the public in advance of that public hearing on the 22nd, and that is the version that the board will vote on. I don't think we need a vote of the board to even accept those changes, to be quite honest with you. They'll simply be a revision that I present to the board. Does that make sense?
Not really.
Yeah, right, not really.
Not really?
No. I mean, many of the changes she made were simply cosmetic. One was grammatical. A couple of them, in one case, she changed the verb to a shall, which is a command, and that's something we really need to be certain that we are in agreement with. And then there was one other change, which I don't remember, which I annotated as being a good one, though that would also require, at least in my mind, some acknowledgement rather than simply incorporation.
Okay.
But I don't think we need to, I'm sorry, I don't think we need to raise them as issues that the public need to comment on. I think we simply need to raise them as issues that we have to take care of their housekeeping more than anything else.
Okay.
You disagree?
No, I don't. I think we're taking the process very, very seriously, which I don't think is a bad thing, but I think that that's the right way to do it. So what I'm going to do for the changes on the 22nd from council, I'm going to indicate what those changes are in the version that I post.
Right, yeah, well, that was my other, I mean, we're going to need to go through your presentation for each one of those again.
So what I did last year, Kathy, is I looked at the audience and I said, is this generally the same group of people, or do we have changes such that folks watching at home would see a change in the presentation? I'm not going to go through all of it again. Like,
Okay, all right.
Unless the board really wants me to, I don't feel a need to do that.
Right, I don't,
Okay.
We have at least 2 contentious issues to deal with on the 22nd, and possibly a third. And they'll take up time. If we go through all of this procedure as well as those, we'll be here till 11 o'clock.
Last comment, I am shocked that there were no comments on the non-conforming structures change. I was shocked, but.
I think we are too professional on that. I think we saw the landmines involved, but I think that it was simply too complicated
right.
to be dealt with. That we've been struggling on that for a number of months.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're very familiar with it.
That's true.
Well, I think the way you presented it, which is basically just saying we're trying to make it easy for somebody to read, and basically it is, ultimately similar to what was there before. But it's easier to read, it's easier for anybody to interpret. And so I think that sort of carried the day as to why that was.
It's also much more specific.
Yeah,
Yes.
right.
And my fear is always we make it longer and we risk folks thinking that we're being more and more restrictive. I tried to sell it as that not being the case. The question is going to be when folks walk into to fill out their ballot, are they going to see it and say, oh my God, this is crazy, and we'll see what happens. So I almost wish we had voted on that one tonight because there were really such limited questions, but we'll quickly present it at the next meeting too. Particularly because of the changes too that were suggested. We have to.
I have a comment about whether we should have discussed things after this public hearing, in that if we assume there's going to be other comment at the next one, shouldn't we really be discussing on the body of evidence rather than just who happened to show up tonight? So I think it may be that it's very appropriate.
That's why we're having them again.
On the second one?
To discuss it the second one. In other words, I don't think we're
opportunity.
remiss to not discussing these issues after this one.
As long as we make sure we do it on the second go-around.
Yep.
And I think we will have done due diligence.
Because we really should be talking about what the whole comment is rather than just who was here tonight.
Absolutely. Well, and why we proposed these.
Right. So
And we didn't do it in a vacuum. We did it for a reason.
Did anybody have any comments on sort of some of the why arguments or anything that you think we should add when we're doing presentations on these at the next meeting? Or do you think it was okay? Fine?
No, I think it was good.
Okay, all right. I just want to make sure that we're, making these clear.
Well, how about adjourning, folks?
Minutes?
The minutes, oh my God, I'm sorry.
I had no changes.
No changes.
no changes.
Move to approve.
Okay, motion's been
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor, please say aye. Okay.
Wants to go home.
All right.
abstain.
Sorry, Kathy.
I wasn't here.
Sorry.
You can vote. You don't have to abstain. If you want to, you can.
Well, I wasn't here, so I should abstain.
Yes, we did.
That's okay.